Today is March 20th, 2024. My name is Melissa Ackerman, and I'll be interviewing Audrey Kariel. How you do today?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Melissa.
Wonderful to have you. Can you tell me about your family, your parents, and if you know something about them, your grandparents, where and when were you born? Let's start there.
Well, actually, I want to tell you that I live in Dallas now, and I lived in other places. I was born in Corsicana, grew up there, went to UT, and married and moved to Marshall, Texas, of all places. Have you ever heard of Marshall?
Yes, I have.
Well, good. I want to know why. But anyway, I spent all my married life, which was almost 70 years there. And then I moved here because my daughter lived here. My husband was ill. But going back to my grandparents, my grandmother lived here at one time before she married my grandfather and moved to Corsicana. But she was from Alsace-Lorraine.
Mm-hmm.
And he, I think, was from Russia, Poland, and I'm not sure where that was.
Okay. When did they come to the United States?
Well,
Do you
they
remember?
married in, I think, 1879 and went to Corsicana. And she was
How'd they end up
here.
How did they end up in Corsicana?
Well, my grandfather, Simon Daniels was his name, from Corsicana, and he came because they were going to take him into the army and send him to Siberia. And I was always inquisitive as a child, so I kept asking questions, and everything I ever heard was they just didn't answer. They didn't talk about it. It was Russia, Poland.
Okay.
Is that the Ukraine now? I really don't know where he came from. My grandmother, well, that was on the other side. This one came from Alsace-Lorraine, and one of my cousins who lived in Dallas, she's deceased now, found someone who had known her when I was younger, and she heard me asking all these questions. And she wrote me this beautiful letter talking about going to visit Alsace-Lorraine with her mother. So there must have been a large group of people from Alsace-Lorraine here, but she ended up in Dallas, and her name was Gradwall, and she had a sister who married someone named Edelstein, and my dad's name is George Edelstein Daniels.
Were they related?
Well, yes, that was her sister's married name.
Oh, okay.
And that's how they honored him. And then I had an uncle, Albert Gradwall Daniels. Daniels was their last name. And his son ended up living his whole adult life here, married to a native Dallasite. So I've had the connections all my life with Dallas.
Mm-hmm. But how did they, was there other family already in Corsicana when they came down?
No, my grandfather, Simon, had a choice between coming to America, where he had a brother in New York City, or being sent to the military and going to Siberia. And he had frostbite, and they wanted to take his feet off, and he just decided he didn't want to go to Siberia.
I understand.
And I am so thankful. So he ended up going to the brother in New York City. When he came to Texas, there really was not a lot of contact that I knew about with the family, except for one thing. And that was when I was one of the ones that helped form the Texas Jewish Historical Society. And I hope you have our book, because I contributed a lot into that book about Marshall and Corsicana and other places. But he didn't get along too well in New York. He didn't like it. So I don't know why he came.
Okay, and what did he do? What did your parents do for a living?
Well, my grandfather started a store, and it was a hardware store at first, and then they added, this was in Corsicana, they added a furniture store, and during the war, they sold tires. It was just a kind of a mixture of things. It was a nice store. I played there a lot as a child.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I'm an only child. I had a brother that died before I was born, and my parents were so happy to have me that I never lacked for love.
Okay.
And
Did you have any cousins or anything that you?
well, my daddy had 9 brothers and sisters, and gets to be the interesting part to me. When the 10th child was born, I think she was 2 years old, and the mother died. And Simon had to take care of the children. And there were people in his family that wanted him to put the children in an orphan's home, and he wouldn't do it. He wanted to take care of his own children. And like I said, I didn't ever know anyone in my family except these nine brothers and sisters had children, and those were my first cousins, and I was very close to them since I had no siblings.
So were they spread out all over the
No,
United
we were
Everybody
most
was in
of us,
Corsicana.
no, not all of them, but most of them were in Corsicana. I think one went to maybe Waco, and I can't remember where another one that
But
I
they stayed in
didn't know
Texas?
very well. But most of them were right in Corsicana.
Wonderful.
And we were just very happy. But then when I helped start the Texas Jewish Historical Society, there was a friend's daughter, Patty Edelman. She was from Tyler. And we were having a meeting in Austin, and her husband was a doctor. And I'm trying to think of his name, and I can't get it. I'm only 92, and I just can remember so much. But he came up to me at this meeting of one of the early ones, Texas Jewish Historical Society meetings, and he said, well, I met your cousin here in Austin. And I said, I don't have any cousins here in Austin. And he said, yes, you do. And I said, well, I know where all my cousins are, and they aren't here. He said, well, what about, don't you have anybody from New York? I said, no, I don't know any of my cousins. Or if there are cousins, I don't know them. He said, he's my patient. Well, he was teaching at UT, psychology. His name was Marvin Daniels. And the doctor, that I can't remember his name, was kind enough to set up breakfast so I could meet him. And when he came in, I remember I heard this voice coming into the lobby, and I turned around, and it sounded like my Uncle Dave, and I turned around and he looked like my Uncle Dave.
Funny.
And he told me that when he was a little boy, his grandfather lived with them. And he would talk, oh, I wanted these letters so bad that he didn't have them. But he said he remembered that his grandfather would say to him, well, I got a letter from Simon today. So I know he was my relative. And he had a daughter, and my daughter met her. But there was never really any contact with anyone except my Texas family. And so many of them lived up here until I moved here, and now most of them are in Colorado, gone to be with their children.
Okay. Well, what was your neighborhood like when you were
My
growing
what?
up? Your neighborhood when you were growing
my
up?
neighborhood was wonderful. I had just a lovely upbringing. I loved playing outside and playing games, and I remember one game I played in the backyard. My mother kept kosher. And we haven't gotten to that part of my life, but by the chicken coop, she had chickens because she had to keep kosher. My grandmother was living with us.
Mm-hmm.
My mother was from Teague, Texas, a big city. The railroad went there. The railroad has a big influence on all of our lives from back then. And so my mother and her brother grew up in Teague, which is tiny.
Where is that?
It's in Freestone County, and now it's been in the news because of the park, the state park.
What's it near?
It's it's kind of close to Corsicana and Mahia and
Okay.
Waco. It's
Thank
in
you.
that area. It's called Freestone County.
Okay.
And I've read about it recently because of this park. The park has caused a big problem in the Texas Parks and Wildlife, which I worked with for
Okay.
years. And so it's caught my attention. So, but going back to, where were we?
Your mother kept kosher. You come from a kosher
Okay,
home,
that's right.
which couldn't have been easy.
It was
back
not
then.
easy, but there was a family in Corsicana that also kept kosher, and so it was wonderful for the whole area, you know, but my grandmother was an invalid. So I had to be kind of quiet around the house, but I loved my grandmother, and she died, I could think, when I was about 12.
Mhm.
But I learned a lot living in that little first home where we lived, and I got to experience a kosher home, and I think it would be wonderful if all Jewish people could experience in it.
Yes. Did your family belong to a synagogue?
Yes, and I don't know if you know about the history of Corsicana, but Corsicana had a temple and a shul.
How many Jewish? You remember how many?
I didn't pay any attention
But it was
at
enough.
that point.
You could keep a Reform and a conservative congregation going.
I never knew whether it was conservative or Orthodox. The reason why I think we had to was because of the Kay Willens family.
Mhm.
And my grandparents were friends with them, and that was how my mother met my daddy.
Okay.
Was that when she became of age, she went to Corsicana, and the Willens family lived across the street from my grandfather, where my daddy had grown up, and they were all close friends, and just turned out to be a very happy marriage. And I loved my parents, and I know they loved me.
Were your parents involved in the synagogue?
Oh, yes. Well, Daddy was Reformed.
Okay, in the temple.
And Mother kept kosher, but she really kind of went with him to the Reform. But the Sunday schools, during the time that I was growing up, there were only 5 children the same age in my grade. And wherever we had the best rabbi was where we had our Sunday school, and we stuck together. I was confirmed at the shul, took Hebrew lessons there, and I got some other wonderful things from the temple that connect to Dallas, and one of them was a rabbi that made a huge impression on my life. And I hope that someone here in Dallas knows about Rabbi Gustav Falk. He was with the American Jewish Committee. He was their executive director, and I really credit him with almost being one of my mentors, making me think.
Really?
And he has no children, and I've tried to contact the office here. I would like to at least know when his death date was, so I'd like to say Kaddish for him. He and his wife Esther, they were good friends with my parents. They came, they were in and out of my house all the time. And just, he was a wonderful guy. Anyway. So where are we headed
Okay,
now?
well, I was gonna ask if there were any different organizations, Jewish organizations that you were affiliated with in your family.
I definitely want you to know about my mother. She was president of the auxiliary for the temple my whole lifetime. And she died, I think, in office. She loved our temple, and she loved the shul. In fact, she was a very spiritual person. And I think that's part of why I'm the way I am. She taught me a lot of good lessons. And the one that, as I've gotten older, I didn't have time to think when I was young. I was just doing. And since I've been up here and I've lost a little bit of my vision, I've had a lot of time to think. And the thing that really mirrors my life is what she taught me about Tikkun Olam. She was about that same thing. She wanted to repair the world in her way. Women didn't do quite as much back then, but in her way she did. And I was always very proud of her. She was, how they did this in Teague, Texas, I don't know. She was a concert pianist. She was an operatic singer. She was an artist.
Mm.
She was the most artsy person I ever knew. And here I come in, and I didn't have any of those skills, but I was going to learn them. I had to learn them in Corsicana, and by golly, I learned them. I don't know. I still am just amazed when I think how she was able to develop all those skills in such a tiny town. And as I got older, and once I got into actually history, and my mother died when she was 49, and I was so sad. She didn't get to meet Lewis, and adored him and loved him and knew he was just right for me.
Mm-hmm.
And he was. It was so special.
Tell me about him. How did you meet?
At college.
Oh.
You
were at UT? You were at Texas?
UT. The first time I met him was in pledge line, and I remember he came through the pledge line, and I heard somebody else talking, and he said, "I'm Lewis Carroll," and one of the girls said, "Yeah, and I'm Alice in Wonderland." But, you know, it was spelled differently, and they laughed, and I turned around and looked at him, and I thought, yeah, he's cute, and went about, you know, meeting other people. And then I found out he was grading my algebra class.
Oh.
And I thought, that's interesting. I always did math, but math wasn't my main subject. I did it, but I didn't understand it. And so I thought, well, I'll get to know Lewis. And I got to know him, and we found out something really special. We had already just about decided that we were for each other, but I was young. And
how much younger were you then?
4 years. Well,
was he a senior when you met him?
He was a senior. Okay. Because of World War II. If it hadn't been for World War II, I wouldn't have met him. But he went away to the Navy for a year. He enlisted when he was 17. And so we were there his senior year and my first year. And but we had already decided that we really had something in common, and maybe there was a spark there. And then we found out that our parents were married on the same day in the same year. My parents got married in Teague, and this was interesting. It was an older rabbi from Temple Emmanuel. His name won't come to me. And then Rabbi Olin married Lewis and me.
Okay.
And they both came on the train.
Okay. That's remarkable, though, that they had the same same anniversary,
year.
Same
but
day,
they
same year.
Didn't know each other.
No, but
that
still.
didn't matter to us. It was almost like it was a marriage made in heaven for us, and it was.
So how long did you? Sorry,
So you need to do anyway. So when we decided to marry, I wanted to get married, and Lewis too. We both wanted to marry on March 11th, and my mother wouldn't. She was already ill.
What was the significance of March 11th? Was that their wedding date?
That was their wedding
parents'
date.
Okay.
And she said, no. She said, after we're gone, that wouldn't be a happy date, so you have to have your own. I must have been rebellious in a way, because we married on April 23rd. But Lewis and I had a lot more fun on the March 11th, and I won't go into that. It was our own little thing that we did. But it had to do with our parents, and we always had wonderful memories that we made on March the 11th, and it just passed.
Oh, it did, yes.
I'm sorry he's been gone for almost 4 years now.
So where was he from?
Marshall.
From Marshall, Texas. So
his daddy was from Marshall, and they had been in Marshall since 1840, the late 1840s.
What kind of business were they in?
Well, when the family first came there, it was an uncle first, and they were well established in Syracuse, New York, their family, the Wiseman family. And a guy named Daniel Doppelmayr went to Marshall. That was his sister, Mary Wiseman. I think they were twins, I'm not sure. But Dan got down there, got involved in the Civil War, ended up fighting on the side of the South, and by 1869, he really loved the South, and he was very successful in Marshall, and he wrote his sister, who was in Syracuse, and said, send me some kids down here. I've got to have some help in this store.
Mhm.
So all the kids came down there, and Lewis's grandmother was one of them, Audrey Kariel.
Okay.
And her brother Joe Wiseman was the first one, and I have a letter that he got from his mother in 1869, and I just loved the way the family communicated. They, did it by letters, and they put everybody's name on the outside of the envelope with a little square beside it, and when you read it, you checked it. Anyway, Lewis's family was so much fun, and they had been in Marshall forever.
So there was a lot of family, it sounds like, down there.
Oh, yes. All 7 of the brothers and sisters started out there. Eventually, they went somewhere else. Joe was the one that ended up with the big department store, and I had a friend who was a historian there in Marshall, and she used to call their store the little Neiman Marcus of Marshall, and I just didn't pay her much attention, and come to find out there is a connection. And when I moved here, one of the Marcus family members lived 2 doors down from me, and from Lewis. Lewis got to meet her too, and she remembered coming to Marshall and visiting.
So did she see the store?
Her grandfather's brother.
Uh-huh.
And there were all kinds. That's a whole interesting story, but it would take too long for me to tell you. But the relatives that they had were such interesting people that I have almost made a lifetime of studying them. And being in Marshall, I've made a study of Marshall. And I spent 10 years as the chairman of the historical commission there. All kinds of wonderful things happened to me just because I lived in Marshall. It was the center of our world, but I think it's really on the world stage.
Were there, do you know how many Jewish families were living there?
Well, the temple is a big part of this.
In Marshall, okay.
Daniel Doppelmayr was the first president, and he had a picture of Moses Montefiore in his home because he admired him so much. So then I had to study Moses Montefiore. Well, small towns haven't made it with the Jewish congregations. Some of them have, and I'm proud of them, but I've lost 3 temples already, almost 4 in my lifetime because of small communities. And this one was going down as time went on, and when we got to the place where the Sunday school was too small, we merged with Longview. It was only 20 miles away, and they had a lovely temple there, and we had a wonderful home, and our children, there weren't enough people for the kids for the Sunday school, and that started out, but then once you get rid of the Sunday school, then the parents have to go for everything, and we sold the temple because we couldn't keep it up, and everything merged to Longview.
Okay, let's go back a little bit.
Okay.
Did you have children?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about your children.
Well, they came first, always, and to this day they come first with everything that I do.
Tell me about that.
Well, I had Nancy,
Mm-hmm.
and she was born in 1953.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mark came in 1956, so I had 2 only children.
Okay.
They were precious, and I love both of them. Nancy is up here in Dallas now, and that's the reason Lewis and I moved here. Mark is in Houston, and Katy, part of his family's in Katy.
Mm-hmm.
And we love going down there, and I just was blessed to be able to see my granddaughter, my first great-grandchild, bat mitzvah.
Oh, lovely.
And I went there in January, and it was just wonderful. She's shown some signs of being like my mother, but she's also like her mother, which It's my grandson's daughter, but she's wonderful, and she's given me some artwork that I know that she could do art if she wanted to. But anyway, that kind of tells you that I'm very Marshall oriented. When we sold the temple, we made sure that some of the artifacts were down there, but we didn't have an exhibit, and we kept getting smaller and smaller as time went on, and finally, the museum there has a wonderful archives. People come from all over the world to use our archives there. And I have papers there and at the Briscoe Center at UT. And that's a good thing because there's so many famous people from Marshall.
Who are some of the famous people from Marshall?
Well,
besides you.
Well, I'm not famous. I don't mean anything, but I got to meet them all. Lady Bird.
Was she from Marshall?
Of course. Karnak. It's right outside of Marshall. She graduated Marshall High School. Her best friend was Jewish, Maureen Cranston. And Maureen went to the inaugurations.
Mm-hmm.
And Lady Bird, was in and out of Marshall all the time. Yes, I knew her and corresponded with her. She helped me on my projects. My first project there was a library. We needed a public library. I'd grown up with a public library in Corsicana, a Carnegie library. And I get to Marshall, and the first thing my mother did was make sure I could get into the music club because she wanted me to continue my music. And I could read music beautifully. I just had no ear.
Mm-hmm.
But I love music. And so I pretty much did, follow what my mother wanted me to do. And so I get in the music club, and they made me president of it. Eventually, I always wanted to be secretary so I could know what was going on and write it all down and be in on the know, but not have to have that. I didn't ever want to be a leader. But my mother had prepared me to be a leader. And so there's a big gap in leadership everywhere, I hate to tell you. And I had no competition anytime I wanted to do anything, because if I was willing to do the work, I didn't want to be the president, but somehow I ended up having to do both.
So what were some of the things that you volunteered your time for?
Well, the music club first, but they had the responsibility of a library, and it was a private, segregated library. But when it's also during the time that I was working with it, it was just holding the community back, and even white people were discriminated against. And then I have to go back to my first real job.
Mm-hmm.
And my first real job was something that I kind of followed after Nancy when I didn't do a lot except just, some volunteer work when I was younger. Lewis and his dad was mayor of Marshall before I was.
Oh, you were mayor? Okay.
Yeah. He was mayor of Marshall from 35 to 47.
Long time.
And that was during the war years. Mm-hmm. And his claim to fame had to do with Dallas. When Franklin D. Roosevelt came to open up the state fair, he had all the mayors, I'm sure you know about that, and they came and sat on the podium with him. Dad was so proud of that, and he had Franklin Roosevelt's picture in his office in Marshall, and he was just so thrilled about that. That was such a neat thing. But anyway, he was beloved by all of Marshall. I never found anybody that didn't like Dad. I think I found some people that maybe weren't so crazy about me, but I think everybody loved Lewis's daddy. So when I got there, I moved into a family that loved their town. That Lewis was president of the chamber when he was 40 years old and did such a great job. And that was at the same time that I was finding out this deficiency about the library. So the chamber kind of took me under their wing. I'd been working with them already, but they gave me a committee, and so I built a library out of that committee, and then they kept giving me committees, and every time they did, I'd do another project.
Well, you must have been doing a really good job.
Well, I did, this is where the Tikkun Olam turns in. I was only doing what my mother and daddy had taught me and what they did. Only there, I never found a problem. Well, but the reason I never found a problem I couldn't solve is because of Dallas. My daddy had a lot of business up here, and we came to Dallas so much during my lifetime.
Can I ask you a question about when you were living in all these smaller towns? Did you face any anti-Semitism?
I didn't think I did at the time, but now in reflection, I'm finding out I did a little more than I thought. In Corsicana, it was during the war. It was a wonderful time to have friends. Part of my life I've spent in interfaith activities. I have devoted my life to that, and I am so hurt by what I see in today's world, but I can't go into that because that would take the rest of the day. Growing up, though, I started my interfaith activities, and friends were very important to me, always. I was an only child. My mother started me out at 3 years old with dance lessons just so I could be with other kids.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how that was going to affect me. Everything she did affected me and made me able to do these things. When we would come to Dallas and the baker was there and the Dolphins was there and that was our meeting places, Daddy would let us off downtown and Mother would say to me when I was little, I can hear it now. Now, Audrey, I've got a lot of errands that I have to do. And if you'll be good while we do those errands, I'll take you to Cokesbury Bookstore and you can pick out a Nancy Drew book. Well, I got all the Nancy Drew books because I was good. I wanted those books. I was an avid reader. Mm-hmm. Nancy Drew kind of formed me, I think. I lived in that and the movie star world that we lived in back then. Everybody always lived happily ever after then. And I love those Nancy Drew books, but since I've been here and thought about those Nancy Drew books, Nancy Drew always had a team. She always solved a problem, and I never met a problem that I didn't want to solve. I just think that problems are there to be solved. There's something in me. And the first one was that library. And the Chamber of Commerce took me in and gave me every aid I needed to do what I had to do because the state was going to put in a system of library loans. And the only way you could be part of that was if you were a public library. Well, nobody talked about segregation. I never talked about segregation. But we were not able to fund and provide good library services for Marshall. So I tried first to get the women to change. Segregation was never mentioned. I wanted to be part of this system. And then they couldn't do it, I could tell. Mm-hmm. And I didn't ever fuss with them or fight with them. They may have said things behind my back, but we never had an unkind word with each other. But since Lewis was president of the chamber, then I was able to move into the community. The like-minded people came and helped me. I didn't need just those women, but the women still stayed with me, even though they couldn't do it.
Okay. Did you have any role models? Did you have any role models?
Well, I had a mentor. My mother's friend that got me into the music club. She was the one that really got me into it. She sang. She was in charge of the temple choir, and she knew, all about me, and I knew all about her, and we were friends. And she was the one that made me be president. I said, I can't do it. I have little children and I can't do it. And she said, yes, you can. And I'll help you. And there was no I couldn't do anything at that point except do it. And then once I got into it, I realized I had to do something because this was wrong and we needed to be, I missed the other part of it. When Nancy was in college, she too went to UT. She worked for our state representative, Ben Grant. He was a wonderful guy. Oh, I could talk all day about him. Anyway, he was a Democrat, but Nancy introduced him to his first wife, who was a child who had grown up in my house, and they had wonderful, beautiful children. And after Nancy was no longer at the Capitol and I had built the library, he wanted me to work for him. And and Lewis and I talked about, there was no way I could go, to Austin because we didn't have that kind of marriage. And Lewis couldn't leave for 4 months. So we decided that I would do something else when he no longer did that. But the time I worked for Ben, I worked for him in Marshall, I got to know every state agency there was. I could talk to them. That wasn't hard. And I don't know. And then when I was, doing the library, I had worked with the state library. So, I knew my way around all that. And it helped me in all my projects. But I just kept working with the chamber, and they just gave me anytime I needed a project done, we did it over there, and they always helped me. And Lewis stayed active in it as well, and there were other problems. So then I ended up with an office in the courthouse when I was commission chairman.
Okay.
I did that for 10 years, and
so
I just had a really an interesting life, but I really don't know how it happened. It wasn't planned. I've never really picked anything, for me personally to do.
At what point did you move to Dallas?
Only after Lewis got sick.
And
we had been retired. We both retired in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And we had about 8 years of fun and games and traveling. And really just had a wonderful time, but he ended up having a heart problem and had 4 bypasses and almost died. And they couldn't find anybody in Shreveport because we're very Shreveport oriented.
Okay.
His mother was from Shreveport,
okay.
And so much of the Wiseman family moved over there. And so every Sunday we would go over there and visit relatives and friends and went to temple some. And now, when we were there during Lewis's illness, I really bonded with the rabbi, and she's the first woman rabbi they've had over there. Okay. She's got her doctorate in Judaica studies. Mm-hmm. I've had more time to deal with being Jewish, I think, since I've been up here. And I go to 2 Friday night services and 2 Torah studies. And Rabbi Walk is one of them here. He comes to my facility. Mm-hmm. And I got interested in his Torah study, and I thought it would be fun and interesting to maybe compare the difference between his and a reform. Mm-hmm. A classical reform, right. The one that I was going to in Shreveport, and I've enjoyed that, and I've learned so much. Did you know that there's really nothing new under the sun? Not anything. Sorry. But anyway, I've missed so much in there about my wonderful family.
Well, you've said some wonderful things, and we're going to need to try to wrap this up pretty soon. Then we can always come back and talk some more, but of what in your life are you most proud?
My family, of course. There wouldn't be any question in my mind. That has always been number one. Maybe the fact that I was married to the same person for all of those many years.
How many years was it? 70 years?
We tried. It was 69. We were trying to make it to April.
That is.
He passed away before that.
What a wonderful.
Right before, we didn't even know the word pandemic or COVID. And he died that January. And I got COVID in March and was put in my cell.
Oh, yeah, that was a terrible time,
Well,
but
you had 2 weeks in isolation and then 2
Yeah.
more weeks.
well,
It was a month. But anyway, we made it and we're all out of that. And I've been blessed. There's so many wonderful people from Marshall that I interacted with. I was asked to be, I'm doing this for Carl. I was asked to be chairman of Marshall's 150th birthday. And that was a wonderful year for me, and it was right before I got to be mayor. So the first thing I did was I decided I wanted to honor the people who had achieved national recognition. And of course, Lady Bird was one, Bill Moyers was one, Dr. James Farmer was another. If you've watched the debaters and know about CORE, C-O-R-E, the organization. Anyway, I interacted with all of those people, and then Lady Bird, when she was a part of all that. When we did the library, she was my national committee honorary chairman, and Bill Moyers was her vice chairman, and Y.A. Tittle, he was in Lewis's class. Have you ever heard of Y.A.?
yes, I have.
Yelverton Abraham. He and Lewis were big buddies, and I got to know he and his wife, and they have a place out on the lake by Marshall. But I got very interested after I'd done some of these. I've got to tell you this because that's when I became mayor.
Okay, tell me.
And I did a lot. I haven't told you any of the really neat things that I got to do while I was mayor. I never aspired to be a mayor. I did all this community work, and there was a group in Marshall that looked for people who were interested in government. I never had even thought about it. I'd asked the city to do all kinds of things, but I always phrased my questions so that all they could say was yes. And they always said yes, and we did them. But I'd never thought about running. But this committee came to me, and Lewis was on it. And they said, we think that you would make a good city commissioner. And I'd never even thought about it. Mm-hmm. And I thought about it, but I did it because Lewis wanted me to also. And Dad had done it. And I thought, well, I can go see. And I think because I had to ask for so much, I thought maybe I do have something to offer on the other side. I need to see what it's like to be on the other side. Well, I sure found out. Nobody wanted to be mayor. It was too much work, and our mayor was chosen from the commissioners. So next thing I know, I'm mayor.
Well,
next thing I know, I'm working with the Texas Municipal League. I'm helping plan their education programs. And it was just so much a place where I fit. I was president of the Association of all the elected people, the Association of Council Members and Mayors or something that we have. And they did the education programs, and it was so much fun. And I interacted in solving problems and trying to figure out what was the best. And that's why I'm so troubled about today. People seem to be in it for the wrong reasons. It hurts my heart. But I became a member of the Texas Municipal League Board and met wonderful other elected people. And it was back, I served at a time when people were civil to each other. Yeah. You might not like it. But anyway, that was pretty much, my life. And then
you've had an extraordinary life.
I did.
And
I had a very blessed life.
And it's been wonderful to hear just a little part of it today.
That's fine.
So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with me. Enjoyed very much. Thank you. Mm-hmm.